It's episode 14 of the Photon Podcast, Whiskey Golf Zero Alpha Tango, the Goat Hiker, a giveaway from Pignology, and more coming up.
AmateurRadio15.com presents Photon, the other ham radio podcast, sponsored by Main Trading Company. Find them online at mtcradio.com. Now, here's your host, Cale Nelson, K4CDN.
Merry Christmas from the Photon Podcast. I am Cale, Kilo 4 Charlie, Delta November, and I've got a really, really cool interview coming up for you in just a couple of moments. We're going to join Jeremy and Steve, and they're going to talk about goat hiking and amateur radio. But before we get there, mtcradio.com, of course, they are the official Photon show sponsor. I hope you guys are spending some money with them, at least giving them an opportunity to earn your business. If you do that, you will be buying from them time and time again. Make sure you check them out at mtcradio.com. They've got all you need, and they've got the prices to match it. Free shipping on most domestic orders over $99. So give them a call, mtcradio.com. Please remember when shopping with them to let them know that the Photon Podcast sent you their way, so that way they know that their advertising dollars are well spent. I also have, in the break, we're going to talk about a giveaway coming up, but let me go ahead and tell you, if you're listening online, go to the sign-up box now and sign up, and you want to win what we're going to give away, and the details for that are coming up in just a minute. But first, let's get to KF7IJZ, Jeremy, and he's chatting with Whiskey Goat Zero Alpha Tango here on the Photon Podcast.
This is KF7IJZ with WG0AT, the Goat Hiker. So, Steve, we've seen you up in the mountains with the goats. You seem, from your videos, it looks like you're lucky enough to actually have a mountain practically in your backyard.
Yeah, I do. It's amazing. Every morning when I head out the door to the last, this last season, the goats have mainly fed, foraged for food rather than feeding them hay. So, but every morning I walk out and I see that mountain up there, and I think, yeah, how lucky am I? It takes by car probably 15 minutes to get to the trailhead, and then 45 minutes, and you've got an 1,800-foot tower that you can launch a signal from and play radio.
So, in looking back in all of your adventures, are there any stories about you and the goats that you never got on video that you just really wish you could have, because it would have made a really great video to share with folks?
It is, yeah. It's almost like you've got to have surveillance camera running the whole time, because they do stuff that's just really funny. I mean, the butting heads, they do that often enough that I've been able to capture some of that. But it's Rooster was notorious for just doing dumb stuff or getting himself into trouble, and somehow he managed to get the coax wrapped around his leg. I had a buddy pole stuck up on a pile of rocks, buddy pole vertical, and he got the coax wrapped around his leg somehow, and he was 240 pounds. So when he moved, whatever was attached to him went with him. And all of a sudden, I look up and I'm talking to some guy in Hawaii, matter of fact, and the buddy pole vertical was jerking over at 45 degrees, and then finally, bit the dust, and I yelled at him, and the result of that was he turned and looked like, oh, I didn't do it, and and then kind of started moving away from me, like I was going to go after him, and so around our campsite, I'm chasing my big goat Rooster, and this buddy pole vertical is dragging behind him about 15 feet. and behind that was my 817. I never got that on tape, but that would have, I'm sure, brought a few laughs.
Speaking of radios, one thing that we've also seen is that for a multitude of reasons, it seems you definitely favor QRP operations, and we've seen the 817, the Elecraft KX3, and the ICOM 703 make several appearances across your videos. Which of the radios would you say is your favorite, or maybe another one of the smaller kit radios? What radio do you enjoy operating the most?
Well, it's like fishing. Every lake is different. Every stream is different. And it depends on the time of day, the propagation, the weather. And you could blend fishing and ham radio together and not know if you're talking about one or the other. But the truth is, the radio that I built, I still have several little ATS, Steve Weber, old solder guy, rigs that are just amazing, and run on a 9-volt battery. You get 2.5, 3 watts out of them, and hooked to a good antenna, particularly when you're sitting on a mountaintop, and no noise floor to speak of. The signals just literally jump out of the earphones, and and I think the fact that you put some sweat equity into it. But there again, there's been times when I was sitting on the edge of a volcano down in the Caribbean, and it was really a treat to have a Rolls Royce of a radio in my hand, the KX3. It's an amazing little radio in terms of performance and all the bells and whistles. But there's time and place for that, and coming back to just the right feature set for what you need to make a contact. It takes me back to the little ATS series rigs.
So, based on your experience from either a GOAT perspective or a YouTube perspective, video perspective, radio perspective, soda perspective, from any of these things that we've seen you do, is there anything that Steve today would go back and tell Steve when you started making your videos that you wish you would have known then?
Yeah, it's all about the journey, at least for me. And, the competitive part of, for example, soda is good, I think, and there's each individual, I think, responds to some aspect of their hobby differently than others, and that's great. As far as the whole video experience, that's been, I just hope I never stop learning. When I sit down and do an edit, it's almost like I learned some new piece of software or some feature in the software I didn't even know was there before. Because I'm not technically, I'm not professionally trained at it. It's one of those videos is one of those hobbies for me that I've just sort of gravitated towards, and I like telling stories with video, and there again, the GOATs are a magnet. They're a magnet on the trail as well. I get stopped all the time, people saying, "Wow, those are GOATs." Yeah, they're GOATs. Can I take pictures? Can I pet them? Can I feed them? It goes on from there. But I don't know if there's one big thing. For me, it's kind of all blended together. The ham radio side of it, actually the KX3 is my base station here, and I've got a dipole in the tree, and I spend more, if you look at my logs, I spend about 80% of my time operating outdoors as opposed to indoors. And I'm not sure why, except that it's just, for me, it's more fun. It's more fun having it put up a station in inclement conditions, or wire up a tree that looks like, man, if I could just get the wire over that top limb, that'd be the center of an inverted V for 20 meters. End fed, of course. But yeah, it's a whole bunch of things, but I think the key for me is just keeping that curiosity alive and never stop learning.
Well, that's certainly a good approach to just about anything in life. So, talking about operating outside, I think at the end of the day, those contacts that you make outside when you're just you're putting an antenna up, you're experimenting, they're worth a little bit more to you because you definitely worked harder to earn them. So, if looking back, is there anything that has come out of your experience doing the YouTube videos and kind of gaining some notoriety in the amateur community? What's happened that you never would have expected to happen? What have been some of the surprises or blessings for doing your channel?
The amount of fans and feedback that I've gotten from people that are non-hams. And one guy wrote me and said, my wife, she never even stepped foot in my ham shack. But when the music that came on when I played a YouTube video of yours, next thing I know, she's leaning over my shoulder and saying, "Oh, there's Rooster and Peanut," and the kids are gathering around. It's like, the bottom line is that I never thought I would inspire non-hams to think that sitting on a rock on a mountaintop beeping out Morse code to somebody on the other side of the planet was cool. And I think it comes down to, if you can show that people that you're having fun, everybody wants to have fun. So it's kind of like Mikey and his Cheerios. If Mikey likes it, it must be fun. And that's what sells a lot of useless stuff that winds up in the closet and here, there, and everywhere. The real secret is one's attitude and finding the fun. And we can do it ourselves, but when you see somebody else doing it, you think, well, ham radio must be fun, and it is. But it's your attitude and what you do with it.
I guess now that you've been doing this for a while, we've kind of really spent a lot of time talking about the goats. But you've been involved in other things. You've been involved in Buddies in the Caribbean. You've been involved in a lot of soda activations and activities. When we get back from the break, I'm going to ask you some questions to talk about those other experiences beyond just hiking up the mountain in your own backyard. Folks, this is KF7IJZ with Steve WG0AT, the Goat Hiker, and we'll be back.
All right, so during the break here, we're going to stop with Jeremy, KF7IJZ. We're celebrating with him his 1,000-plus subscribers to his KF7IJZ YouTube channel. And by doing that, he has partnered with Nick, N3WG from Pignology, our friend from the West Coast. And they're going to be giving away a free piglet. Now, who can win the piglet? Anybody. Any Photime listener can win the piglet simply by going to amateurradio15.com and signing up as an email subscriber. Now, if you're already an email subscriber to the Photime podcast, you're already entered to win. If you haven't yet entered or signed up for the Photime email listing, you probably want to do that. This contest will run all the way through December. We're going to draw it after Christmas. It's eligible only to U.S. ham radio licensees. and the free shipping applies to this giveaway. So not only going to give it to you, they're not going to make you pay for it to ship it to you. It is about, I don't know, we got a little bit over a month to run the entire month of December for the giveaway, and it's pretty cool, guys. They're giving you a piglet. That's not a cheap little toy. We'll have a link to it on the website. But remember, to win the Pignology Piglet from KF7IJZ and N3WG and Pignology, celebrating 1,000 plus subscribers to the KF7IJZ YouTube channel, you must go to amateurradio15.com, sign up there, all right, in the email listing, and you're automatically entered to win. All right, you'll also included is one free copy of the Pignology Hamlog app, and Jeremy will make sure you get that as whoever wins the contest. All right, Main Trading Company's got a few words to say, and then we're going to get right back to Jeremy and Steve. Stay tuned.
Visit mtcradio.com today, a great one-stop mom-and-pop shop for everything ham radio. Radios, antennas, power supplies, wire and cable, books and training materials, microphones, headsets, and accessories. Find popular brands like MFJ, Heil Sound, Jetstream, LDG, Alinco, Comet, Texas Bugcatcher, Radio Waves, and more. mtcradio.com, an authorized Kenwood and ICOM dealer. mtcradio.com.
All right, folks, we're back. This is KF7IJZ for the Photime Amateur Radio Podcast. Here with me is Steve Galshoot, WG0AT, the Goat Hiker from YouTube. So, Steve, beyond just getting to pal around in your own backyard and being able to go up and down the mountain every day, talk a little bit about some of the other activities. I know you're involved in something called Buddies in the Caribbean. What's that all about?
Yeah, so I stumbled onto Bud one day in terms of his antenna design on the internet, and built a buddy pole. And actually, half of a buddy pole. I only built a vertical, and based on his design, it seemed to work pretty good. And then I decided, after the homebrew version of it sort of fell apart over time, it wasn't very goat-proof, and I wound up with a commercial version of it. And from there, I sort of struck up a relationship with Chris and Bud, and Chris asked me if I would be interested in going to the Caribbean. Actually, it was St. Martin, St. Martin and Saba, to video some of the activities that he had planned with the guys that go down. There's 8 of us, and they kind of go to a different island every year, and I go along to videotape and document the adventures, so to speak. And also, it's a trip where he tests a lot of his R&D and new products and that sort of thing. So it's a kind of a marketing venture, but it's a holiday mini de-expedition where the guys have a lot of fun, make a lot of contacts, and so there's that experience of being on the other end of the radio and actually being the DX, if you will, and having thousands of callers. And it's if you've never experienced that, it's quite something. But that is almost very similar to what happens when you're sitting on a summit on the air peak somewhere miles from nowhere, and here you've got all these chasers that are calling you once you're spotted. And you've got this flea-powered rig and compromised antenna, and it's a hoot for about maybe 15 or 20 minutes until you run the file down, and that's a similar kind of experience to being on a holiday expedition somewhere in the Caribbean or South Pacific.
Well, so just looking at the buddies in the Caribbean, because I do want to come back to soda, because we actually, of course, I don't know when this episode will air, but we posted episode 6 today of the podcast featuring Kilo Yankee 7 Sierra from Seattle, Washington, who talked all about soda. So we'll get into that here in a minute. But
Okay.
From the perspective of your time in the Caribbean, I mean, has there been any particular story that stands out that's just, really cool, or you were really surprised? Because I know down there you have the benefit of a saltwater amplifier, right?
Oh yeah, there's until you experience that, it's hard to compare it to any other experience, except maybe where say you've had a vertical in a noisy environment, and that was your only antenna, and then all of a sudden one day the power grid goes out, and so the noise goes away. Let's just say the noise goes away, and at the same time you've put up a horizontal dipole, and now you can hear signals that you didn't even know were there before. At the same time, you can talk to them, and I mean, sitting on a beach in the Caribbean on an island and have Europeans come rolling in like it's Sunday afternoon on 40 meters, locals in terms of signal strength, and going back to them, it's the same way. I mean, when your signal hits that salt water, it seems like it doesn't stop until it is in Europe somewhere. So it's a cheap way of making lots of contact, so to speak. I mean, as far as minimal antennas and not much power over saltwater yields a lot of results.
From saltwater to soda. So kind of give us a little bit of background about how you got involved in Summits on the Air when you first learned about it.
I was wandering around the hilltops near my house and playing radio, and one of the guys in Canada that was active in soda, John Pierre, VA2SG, I think is his call. He sent me an email and said, "Hey, Steve, why don't you do the work in bring up Colorado as far as Summits on the Air, and there's a lot of groundwork that needs to be done. The Brits have, when they created Summits on the Air, they kind of modeled it after Islands on the Air, and there's a certain criteria that a summit has to have. It has to have 500-foot prominence. Well, what is prominence? It's that it doesn't touch anything for 500 feet. And actually, the nearest saddle is greater than 500 feet. So that's considered a qualified summit, and it can go in a database and be given a reference number, and it's also scored in terms of number of points for both the activator and the chaser, and both are trying to get certain number of points to get awards in this kind of thing. But there are again different strokes for different folks. Just the act of doing it causes you to improve your. Say you're chasing it, well, it causes you to improve your receiver, your antenna, and get the maximum performance out of your equipment, just like any contest would. But and for an activator, it's I think even more fun because you're outdoors. There's a physical challenge of getting to the location. Maps. Topos, all of the navigation things. And then you're outdoors. So you got to have an eye on the weather, and you've got to pack the right gear, and Make sure you got plenty of water. Make sure you've got enough food. Make sure you've got the right clothing. 10 essentials, so to speak. And and then you get there, and you realize you forget that one little BNC to PL239 adapter for your FT817, or some little piece of coax, or it's the power cable that goes from the battery to your little BTS radio. And it's constant learning. The other side of it is that it, I think, makes you a better operator as far as being able to improvise. And we talk about ENCON and Aries and Races. Those guys, when the infrastructure fails, or for whatever reason, they've got to go set up a radio station somewhere. Unless they've practiced it in, training, it may be an easy plug and play because they have an extra piece of coax in the trunk of their car. But I think SOTA kind of get out there on the edge, the sharp edge of the rope, so to speak, and forces you into doing stuff that you may not encounter in the civilized world.
I guess, have you ever been caught off guard by forgetting the antenna adapter?
Yes. That's why I mentioned it.
So when we talked to KY7S, he told a story about doing some skiing in and running into some bad weather and deciding to kind of turn back and not make the contact. So have you run into a situation where you were all but, you were just about to summit and then something happened that made you turn back and you weren't able to make contacts?
Yeah, running into inclement weather, I've been turned around a couple times. The hardest thing is when you've invested, 5.5, 6 miles one way into a peak, and then the weather just, it turned, and you're a mile from your goal, and you have to throw the towel in and say, well, save it for another day.
Has there ever been a time when doing SOTA where you were legitimately in fear of your life?
Not really. They have an event here in Colorado that Bob Whitty started, K0NR. Bob, about a little less than 20 years ago, started an event in August. It was like the first weekend or Sunday in August, where a bunch of guys would hike to the top of 14ers with their VHF rigs and work each other. And somebody said, well, gee, that'd be kind of fun to take an HF rig up there and play with it and see, if we could maybe get somebody else on another 14er. Well, Brian, I can't remember his call. He's going to hate me for that. He climbed, was it Mount Shasta? And, he had to seriously do some technical climbing to get up there. But he wound up on top of Shasta the same day that we wound up on top of Humboldt. And we weren't really in fear of our lives, but it was so windy, it must have been gusting 50 to 60 miles an hour.
Wow.
And just to get an antenna up, and we hunkered down behind some rocks so that we could get out of the wind, so to speak. And we had goat support. The goats were our Sherpas for carrying a lot of our antenna parts and pieces and batteries, whatnot. But there's a video where I'm talking to a guy, and his pants and shirt are literally like just like he stepped out of a wet shower, but they're totally dry. But the wind is blowing them against his skin so hard it looks like he's wet.
Wow.
And he's having to talk it up, so trying to talk over the wind. So you definitely tell it's blowing up there. But it was, the whole wind creates a dynamic of this constant annoying pressure on you, and everything you do when you unfurl the coax and accidentally drop it, there's this constant nervousness of I don't want to lose anything, and we want to get down off this thing safely, but and you're doing a balanced act with your judgment as well in terms of being at 14,000 feet. You've got 1/3 less oxygen, or I should say, you've got 2/3 less oxygen. You're only processing 1/3 of as much oxygen as you would at sea level, and that affects your judgment. I mean, it's like having a martini. And I remember looking at the menu structure on my 817, and for the life of me, I couldn't figure out how to turn off the box. It was, hypoxia, a lack of oxygen.
Another thing that you're kind of known for is that you don't just stick around the mountains there in Colorado. You've done actually quite a bit of traveling around the United States to activate different summits and do other hiking and radio related activities. What has your favorite trip been? Or maybe your favorite SOTA activation?
It'd have to be Eagle Cap in Oregon, and myself, Chris, W6HFE, and Guy, and Giannis. Giannis came with us on that trip. He was basically be his father-in-law. Anyway, we had instead of goats, we had a pack horse named Surprise, and fortunately, she didn't pull any surprises on the trip. But it was great. I mean, she carried an equivalent of a rider, which was 120 pounds of gear. And her handler was Larry, who had worked for the Fish and Game in Idaho for something like 30 years, and it packed into numerous lakes and that kind of thing. So he was also ham. Anyway, that trip was stellar. We activated a bunch of peaks in the backcountry. Chris did some fly fishing and just a lot of great, mountains and a few campfires. And anyway, when we came out, we decided we wanted to do one more, so we took a gondola ride. It was a gondola activation. And we had probably half a mile to hike up to the actual summit, and, made lots of contacts and rode the gondola back down to and actually we had to wait for the gondola to show up. So we sat in the little restaurant up there and had a celebratory beverage to kind of top off the adventure. But that was one of our favorite ones. And, the list goes on. I sat the other day, somebody wanted to play one of the videos in a club meeting, and which I always offered to do. I mean, if anybody wants to use video to generate interest or goodwill in ham radio, that's what they're for. And so I was going through them, trying to figure out the best one, and every time I bring up one of those things, I'm reliving that whole experience all over again. Not only do I get to be at the event and experience firsthand, but I'm recording it maybe with one or two cameras, and I'm thinking about, oh yeah, I've got to have close-up shots of that. I'm mentally editing it real time, because I'm the photographer. But not only that, but then I'm trying to figure out, okay, what's the story? Or is it just documenting the event or the experience. It's fascinating. It really is. It's fascinating from the standpoint that all the pieces fit together, and sometimes you have to make up a piece, like going out in the backyard and throwing the radio on a rock and doing a close-up of the front panel, and go to all the trouble of hooking up an antenna to it so the S-meter or the bar graph does jump up and down and looks like you got signal, but that you've already recorded the audio from earlier of the signal that you had, so you can lay that underneath the picture and the soundtrack and create that suspension of belief that, oh yeah, there's the radio they used, and it's actually sitting on the edge of the rock.
Well, Steve, I want to thank you so very much for being here with us today and sharing your stories and giving us some of your time. One last question I'll ask before we go is, so what's next? What are you working on these days?
Well, right now, actually, seems like we've kind of let the last 10 years slip by and living in an environment where, it's the whole idea was less maintenance, let Mother Nature take its course. But I've been doing a lot of home improvements and rebuilding decks, and my next project is a goat barn, so we don't have to haul hay out there in the middle of winter. We can just step into the dry, warm goat barn and put some more in the feeder or whatever. But, Mount Herman's just staring at me right now out the window. It's almost dark here, but I can hop in the car and be there at the top of the mountain in an hour, or I can hike from the house and be there in 3 hours. And actually the 3-hour hike is, QSOs are all the more rewarding. You burn, maybe 1,000 calories to just get up there and have that as a zero noise level, and be able to talk to your buddies out there that show up on frequency. So I don't know. It's life's an adventure, and every day there's something new to learn, and I just, if there's anything on my bucket list, it's I would like someday to explore up in the Alaska area, Northwest Passage. I think it would be fun, but I hear it's pretty RF dead up there, which is disappointing. But it's still a lot of places to go and things to do and things to see.
Well, very good.
But
go ahead.
I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you, Jeremy, and thanks again for providing the opportunity.
Well, again, thank you for taking the time. Like I said, there's a lot of admiration for what you've done, and we really appreciate you just kind of volunteering your time. Because one thing I know also is I know you always enjoy speaking to clubs. I know you travel all over the country to go to ham fests. I don't ever expect you to remember me, but maybe next year at Dayton, you'll be able to put the name to the face. But I've seen you at Dayton the last 3 years at the Buddy Pole booth, and you've always been so warm and friendly to all the folks that come by to say hi. And thank you very much for just donating your time to amateur radio and to help promote the hobby and get people interested. So, folks, again, KF7IJZ here with Steve, WG0AT. Check out his YouTube channel by searching for Goat Hiker, all one word. And, Steve, maybe we'll have you on again sometime in the near future and see what you've been up to.
Thanks, Jeremy. Thanks, Steve, both of you, for quite an entertaining episode here of the Photon Podcast. It is Christmas season. Merry Christmas. If you have some gifts that you need to purchase for your buddies, your friends, your loved ones in amateur radio, remember Main Trading Company, mtcradio.com. If you would rather spend some dollars on Amazon, make sure you check out the original and still going strong Amazon Photon store. You can find the links to both of those in the show notes today at amateurradio15.com. Do not forget the giveaway for the folks who have decided to sign up for the email list on the amateurradio15.com website. It's right there on the top right side, so sign up and you're automatically entered to win the Piglet and more from Pignology, M3WG Nick, and our friend Jeremy, who so graciously brought us this interview this afternoon. Jeremy, thank you very much. His call is KF7IJZ. You can find him on YouTube. You can also find Steve, Whiskey, Golf, 0, Alpha Tango. You can find all those links and the stuff that we talked about today in the Photon Podcast show notes at amateurradio15.com. I will continue to ask that you go to your favorite place you listen to the program, that you rate the program, you review the program. Not only that, but you're sharing it with your friends and fun guys here in the hobby. Thanks again for listening. We'll catch you next time. Merry Christmas.
Thanks for downloading, listening, and subscribing to AmateurRadio15.com presents Photon, the other ham radio podcast. You can find our past episodes, web links, and more at AmateurRadio15.com. That's AmateurRadio15.com. Follow us on Twitter at Photon Podcast. And remember to visit our show sponsor, Main Trading Company, at mtcradio.com. Till next time, 73s.